Hello, everyone. Welcome to our FHIR Android software development session. We're going to focus mostly on standard data capture. Before we get started, for those of you new to Digital Square, we work with innovators, governments, and donors to support digital health programs. And one of the ways we do that is support adaptable, interoperable tools that are designed to work together seamlessly. We support those tools through webinars like this. This is a bit of a special webinar. We have a colleague from Google who's going to walk us through their work on Android SDK, where we'll learn a little bit about how it was developed, the FHIR engine, and then the structured data capture library. Using this information and our experience from our FHIR questionnaire webinar, we'll be able to explore how to build a real-world application using an example specification to illustrate how FHIR can be used to support your project. Just in case you missed it, if you want to follow along on that example, please do download these links. They're also in this Google Doc that I will share with folks. If you guys want to try and just capture those. And I'll just do a quick introduction of our speakers. So today we have with us Jing Tang. He is a software engineer at Google UK. Since joining Google 9 years ago, he has worked on back-end, front-end, and mobile projects in ads and Android, and he's been involved in Android FHIR SDK since 2020. He is joined by our FHIR data management standards and interoperability expert, Jose. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to both of you. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, welcome to this session. I will just share my screen for sharing the slides that you will get access to. I hope you can confirm that you can see my screen. So in this webinar, as Rhonda was saying, that we will guide through the creation of a sample demo app on Android based on the specifications that we have. So the agenda for today is as follows. So first, we will look back into what we have been doing so far. So what is the current specification, our current demo specification looking like? So focusing on the FHIR questionnaire and the SDC capabilities. So we'll look a bit into that. We might look a bit into how to create a questionnaire just to get our hands a bit more dirty, just to have a better sense of how this works. So we will guide through that. We'll present how that shows up, and once we have our specification, then we will introduce the Android part. So in that moment, Jing will explain how to create an application, taking the output from the specification. So how to create an Android application based on a FHIR specification. Using that, he's going to introduce the SDK, the FHIR SDK, some design principles that are behind creating the application. He will show us the relevant libraries that are used to create this application. And the fun bit, he will actually walk us through to actually creating an application, adding the dependencies and adding the questionnaire that we have created in our specification. With all of this is going to be a rather practical question, so and technical. So for those of you that are not technical, feel free to try to follow it, what we are doing, but focusing more on other questionnaires. Of course, we'll use the food allergy questionnaire, but you can extrapolate this easily to other questionnaires. And at any time, please feel free to ask questions. To Jing, mostly to myself as well on the questionnaires, but yeah, it's supposed to be a very much hands-on session, so jump in whenever you want, unless it's a crucial part of the description and Jing is just following through. So with that in mind, our usual disclaimers. So FHIR is a registered trademark of HL7, Health Level 7 International. The fact that we use the FHIR trademark here does not constitute an endorsement by HL7 of this webinar or this series of webinars. This is definitely not an HL7 official training. There are training opportunities and people are encouraged to follow those up on hl7.org or other institutions that provide similar training. Excuse me?
Wait.
So the This presentation is a collection of freely available materials. Everything that we are using here is made available through the FHIR community, or through the PATH or Digital Square communities, or OpenHIE communities, or Google. So everything here is a collection of freely available materials. The diagrams that we might use are taken from our specification or from the FHIR website. And this presentation is shared under Creative Commons Attribution License, which means please share away as long as credits are due, as we do to HL7 when we take their materials that they give under the same license. So the goals for our training today is to first understand a bit of how the Android FHIR SDK is supposed to work. So what is behind it, what is the purpose, and how to use it. And the second part, the practical part, is to actually walk through and to be able to be more familiar with using the SDK in displaying a questionnaire in a sample application. So the links that Randa was just posting, those are just 2 links: the repository for the specification, so the food allergy webinar, and the IDE for developing Android applications that you can download for free as well. And with that, I will start with a recap of our previous session and where we stand now in terms of specification. So we have, in the last webinar we talked about case reporting and structured data capture. And the architecture was, in summary, the architecture that we were aiming at is like this. So there's a bit of data collection. If you want to do case follow-up, case reporting, you have data collection. You collect data from somewhere, then you have to maybe transform it, to extract it into a data pool, and then you make use of this. And if you do case reporting, this is pretty much about analytics or surveillance. One crucial part of this that we explored last time was the data collection part, and this can be done by interfacing FHIR systems directly, or systems using the FHIR language. You can say, I have an EHR, or I have a patient management system, or I have a lab management system, and I want to extract data out of there using FHIR. Or you can have user-provided data, so in the form of forms that the user types in the data to collect data into a standard format. And this part is what we are focusing on, now. So it's data collection using forms. So, for example, in our implementation guide, for those of you who haven't seen the videos or you were not in the session, we have been doing this exercise of from scratch to a working implementation. We took the example of food allergy as a simple scope for an application, and we followed our process. So we defined the data, we defined the value sets, we defined all those things that are mentioned in previous webinars. And at this moment, and as was shown last webinar, and I'll show it again, we added a self-reported questionnaire for capturing, a questionnaire for the user to self-report their allergies. So if we have the data in terms of FHIR resources, we could also add a way for the user to enter their own allergy. So a user that doesn't know how the details of FHIR are and what is mandatory or not, or is not a technical user, just a normal user, someone that wants to have a mobile application, for example, how would they report this without having a full EHR or a more complex system based on FHIR? And this is what we have, and that's what I will show also the making of, let's say. So we added on top of our food allergy implementation guide, we just added a questionnaire that allows the user to enter data in a structured form. This allows us to do the following. So the process is pretty much like this. We had the logical model that says this is the data that we need in a food allergy, and this is part of your requirements analysis and gathering process. You sit with stakeholders and we see, okay, what information do we want? Of course, the patient, of course, the thing that the patient is allergic to, of course, the status, or maybe the status of the allergy, and the status whether the allergy is really verified, or if this just the user was thinking that they were allergic, but it was just some other mechanism that kicked in, the date, and who recorded the allergy, etc. So we have this model from a functional perspective, And then we transform this. In the previous sessions, we transformed this directly into the FHIR resources. Now we transform this into the, into a questionnaire, so into a way to get data. In FHIR, it looks a bit like this. I'll show how this looks from different perspectives. So the questionnaire is just a FHIR resource that has, in this case, a title, instructions, the patient as a data collection field, and the allergen and the clinical status. So we added those fields there. And because the tools are available, so because there's lots of tools available on this standard, on the FHIR standard, and on the SDC for questionnaire usage in FHIR, we can rely on libraries like we are going to see today for the Android, or libraries like the one that I'm showing in the bottom of the screen there for just a web display of the questionnaire. So, and this is what I would like to share now. So for those of you who have downloaded the food allergy repository, or for those of you who haven't, I will just see if I can open the, it should be here. Oh, sorry, the other tab. Oh, this one is in full screen. So let me just see here. So this is our source. I'm now going to enter the specification and see how we made the questionnaire. So this is our specification. We have our input files where, as per previous webinars, we make our models, then our profiles, we add our terminology, and the last thing we added is a form. This form is done in Sushi language, so it's Sushi is or FHIR shorthand is a shorthand language for expressing FHIR resources. By the way, it's becoming really helpful when we talk about FHIR, that we talk about specification of systems using FHIR, that people become familiar with the Sushi or the shorthand language. And since it's a standard language, I think it's really interesting that people get more and more familiar. So I'm going to show now in practice how this questionnaire came to life using the Sushi language. If this language triggers interest, so if people say that or think that it would be nice to have a follow-up on the Sushi or the shorthand language for FHIR, which is just a concise, much more concise way of expressing FHIR resources, please at any time just drop us a line in the chat, and then we will take that as input for future sessions. So we have this. It looks like a bunch of code. I will walk through how this means, but basically what this means is that we have a food allergy questionnaire, or actually let me show this here in the, oops, let me just show this in the code editing. So it's a food allergy questionnaire. It's an instance of a questionnaire. So this is what the Sushi language or the shorthand language allows us to do. It's an instance of questionnaire. There's a description, there's a title, and then there's a couple of things. I'll leave these to the end. And then there's a title. So every FHIR questionnaire has a title, a description, a name, can have a version and a status, or has to have a status, and the subject type. So these are the attributes in the FHIR resource questionnaire, and we are just using this language to type this in. After this, we just added questions. For those of you who will want to do this, the actual language to do things in FHIR is like this, so or in shorthand is to do this. And just for you to see what this results in. This, what I'm showing on the left side of my screen, is corresponding to this. So let me see here. So see, the description is here. I just typed the description. As you can see, it's much more compact. So there's a name, there's a version, there's the items, which are these ones. And the first item is the title and has a text and is of type display. Second one is instructions and is also of type display. So these are the data types that the questionnaire resource supports. And what we're just doing is to have a more concise way of expressing this. So for example, this line here, it's basically a macro that we created that creates the this thing here. it's a bit more compact, and it helps a lot to have macro functions, and the macro function is actually defined here. So it's also a feature of the shorthand language. So whenever there is this line, this is what it does. So it pretty much is just a shortcut to a language that is already compact. So these are the questions. So adding one question on the patient of type string, one question on allergen of type choice, one question which is clinical status, etc., etc. So this is adding the questions. Next to this, and for some of those questions, they are driven by value sets. So for example, the substance, we had defined that the substance is not any substance, is not free text, it's something that comes from a value set. So we say, okay, then the item, this item has an answer value set. This is all in the questionnaire specification. And this is from this food allergy. And this is why this food allergy here is defined here. So I define the value set, and then we use it inside the questionnaire. And this thing here is just a nice trick for us. For those of you who remember, we have in FHIR, we have contained resources. So we have, instead of having one resource for the questionnaire, and then another resource for one value set, and then another resource for another value set, which is all we need here, what we can do in this case is to have just one resource, which is the questionnaire. And inside that resource, we contain the value sets. That's why these value sets are called contained. So this is contained, contained, contained. And that is why in my resulting JSON, I just have one item, which is of type questionnaire, and it has contained resources like value set food allergy. And it has another one, value set food allergy verification status, and another one, which is food allergy clinical status. Those are contained, and then comes the body of the questionnaire. So I just wanted to give this quick input into how the questionnaire is created. Once we do this, then it shows up in our specification. So let me go back to our specification. And once the specification built, this is visible in our artifact index, where you see the food allergy self-report. This JSON that you see here is exactly the JSON that was created by the tools, and the rest is just rendering. So it's just, this is a tree view, so it's a nicer display of this. And this is a preview, a form preview of the food allergy self-report. It's just for driving us to see if this makes sense, if I forgot some fields, or if I got the hierarchies right or wrong, and how this works. So this is just a helpful tool, let's say, to show things. But once we have this, then we have our specifications, we have our implementation guide. The whole thing is one package of technical artifacts, namely this JSON here. And this is a JSON that actually can be used and taken over by any application, the one that I just showed on the web, or the Android application. And this is the point where I would now hand over to Jing to say, okay, Jing, now show us the magic. After we create this specification that contains one questionnaire, suppose that you are a developer, and what do you need to do to take it over and to create this in the form of an actual working application?
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. So I'll take over from here. And also thank you, Rhonda, for the introduction earlier on. So my name is Jing, everyone. Nice to meet you. And I'm gonna, for the rest of this webinar, I'm gonna talk about the Android FHIR SDK, first of all, and then we will, in the second part of my time, I will be going through a practical example to use the questionnaire that we have just seen to create an Android application. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen, and we'll go through some content on the Android FHIR SDK first. I hope people can see my screen now. So yeah, so we'll talk about the Android FHIR SDK. We'll go through the basics of it, what it's about, some of the design principles we have established, essentially things that make this piece of infrastructure special. And then we'll go into a bit more details to talk about the 3 main libraries. And also we have 2 demo apps, which we'll show in this section. And then finally, I want to just talk a little bit about the resources that's available, you know, the places where you can find help and ask questions if you need to. So let's jump right in. Overview. So the Android FHIR SDK, I'm just going to read it out loud first. It's a set of libraries written in Kotlin for building offline capable mobile first healthcare applications using FHIR resources on Android. So there's a link to the code base. It's just /Google/Android FHIR on GitHub. Please feel free to take a look. And just one thing that I want to sort of emphasize, which is that the libraries, the SDK right now is active development. You know, we still consider the SDK to be in its early days. So we're constantly looking for community feedback and any contributions. If you want to send a pull request or raise some issues after you've tried the SDK, you know, these things are very, very welcome. And at the end of this section, I will talk a little bit about how you can reach out to us. So yes, on the right of this slide, you can see that this is the screenshot of the current code base. But it's still under very active development. So diving into the definition in a bit more detail, you know, describe what it is, but just to go into a bit more detail to see some of the design principles that's actually underlying the Android FHIR SDK. So first of all, it is open source. It is using Apache 2 license. That means you can use the repository, you can fork the code, you can copy the code. That's more than welcome. And we consider you know, the SDK to be part of the, you know, the open source ecosystem of tools and infrastructure for global health programs and applications. And just one more comment, which is we do have a contrib folder in the code base. So if you are making modifications locally, if you are forking the repository, and then you have done something that's special, maybe in your use case, please do consider maybe making a contribution back to the repository, because what's useful for you may well be useful for other people. And it doesn't matter what stage of maturity it is at. You know, we can look at the code and we'll evaluate, and then we could put in a contrib folder if it's not fully mature yet. So that's the first thing. The SDK is open source. Secondly, it is FHIR native. I think this is very obvious because the clue is in the name. The purpose of the SDK really is to help the adoption, increase the adoption of FHIR, and providing some infrastructure for developers, especially Android developers, to utilize the tools that's already out there, and also to have a system that is able to communicate with you know, the backend FHIR servers and other analytics tools. So that's the second one. It's FHIR native. And then the other two design principles is really about what sort of what we're trying to support in terms of the set of functionalities we have. So the first thing is we support Android FHIR SDK supports online, offline usage, and this is very important because a lot of use cases that's important to our implementers is cases where you may have community health workers working in very remote areas, right? So you may have an Android device that doesn't have connectivity, or have very bad connectivity for a prolonged period of time. So we have to support offline usage for those use cases. And once the device is regains connectivity, for example, the community health workers may have worked in an area for a number of days, and then they're going back to the facility. That's that's the point where the Android FHIR SDK is able to then reconnect and then upload any sort of data that's been collected or modified back to the server. So this is a very, very important principle that we support, because if we don't support offline usage, then you could argue, you could just build a, you could just build a FHIR, Android FHIR client, right? But the SDK is more than that. It's far more than just a FHIR client. And then finally, the Android FHIR SDK supports clinical workflows. So what do I mean by that? I think the purpose here is really to provide building blocks so that developers can essentially pick and choose and create and build their own application. Some of the examples include, so one of them is the SCC example. We have a question. If you have a questionnaire, we do have a set of APIs where you can turn the questionnaire essentially to Android screen or Android app, right? And that's probably part of your health workers workflow. And the other example is the workflow library, which is currently still in very active development. What it does is it supports the FHIR operations such as $apply or measure evaluate. So maybe you have collected some data using the SCC workflow, and then you want to maybe generate a care plan for a patient or create some indicators. In those cases, you can use the workflow library. You can see already here there's a lot of different configuration you can decide to go into if you want to use different components of the Android FHIR SDK. I think following from the previous slide is very clear that the SDK is not just one API, is not just one library, it's actually a set of libraries. And actually this structure has been changing since the very beginning, since we started working on Android FHIR SDK. So at the moment we have arrived at this structure where we have 3 different libraries. The first library, which is probably the most fundamental one, is the FHIR Engine Library, pun intended. And the FHIR Engine Library itself is basically a set of APIs built on top of a local database on Android device. So first of all, it has the ability for you to store and manage FHIR resources, but then you can also synchronize with the server. And then the second library is the structured data capture library, which will, this is the library which we'll use later on in our second part of this webinar. So what it does is it allows you to collect data, validate data, and process data on Android using the FHIR questionnaires. And then lastly, the workflow library, which is still very early, still in a lot of active development, is the library where we want to provide some decision support and analytics. So these are the sort of FHIR operations that I mentioned. If you go on the HR7 website, there is actually a list of operations. We definitely do not claim to support all of them, but we're starting from $apply and measure evaluate. Okay, so now I'm going to go into these libraries one by one. So let's talk about the FHIR Engine Library first. This is a sort of architecture, a very simple architecture diagram of the library. On the left, in the box, you can imagine this is the FHIR Engine Library, but you can also imagine there is an Android application built on top of this. Essentially, the box kind of represents the mobile environment. Where on the right you have the FHIR server, which is where you store your data and what the Android device is communicating with. So in the FHIR Engine Library, as I mentioned, there's a database, and then there's 3 sets of APIs that are very important. The first set is the data access API. I think it's a very straightforward set of APIs. It allows you to save and load from the database, modify your data, manage your FHIR data. There's nothing really fancy about this set of APIs. The second set of APIs is the search API. What it really supports is searching the FHIR resources, and the structure that we have built the API is very similar to the FHIR search specifications. So we took a lot of inspiration from the search parameters, the way the FHIR RESTful API, search API is constructed. And we'll look at some examples later on. It's actually a really interesting set of APIs because we're using Kotlin DSL to build that. And then finally, the sync API is the API that allows you to synchronize your database data on your Android device with the FHIR server. Let's go into a little bit more detail on the local database, the SQLite database on Android. So first of all, I want to say there are many FHIR resources, and the FHIR as a specification is, is changing, is evolving. There's new versions coming out. So it's actually incredibly difficult to design a database especially a relational database, to represent FHIR resources. If you think about a traditional way of sort of designing a database in a normalized way, then we probably would need to create a table for every type of resource, a table for patients, a table for observations, et cetera, and also the relationships between these different resources we may require even more tables if the relationship is for example, many to many, right? You would have perhaps a table that links patients with all the observations that have been made about the patient. So it's incredibly complex. So what we have done here is actually to take a very flexible approach to try to build something that can work with all FHIR resources and can be easily adapted when there's new resources coming about, when there's new versions of FHIR that's been published. Also, just a kind of a note, this is also quite similar to the FHIR's database design on the server side. So we did take some inspiration from how they've done it. So going into the exact database tables, the most important table is the resource table. So this is where we store all the FHIR resources as JSON documents. It's a serialized sort of blob saved in the resource table. And the reason that we have this table, as I said, is because it's very difficult to create relational normalized database tables. So we have to put everything in one table as documents. But then that sort of poses a problem, right? Because if everything is in the same column, essentially, how do you even retrieve data? How do you even search things by the specific properties that particular resource may have? So that's where we build the index tables to support any search. We have a index table per search type. So if you have, for example, if you have a patient, you may want to search for the patient, search for patients by their first name or last name. In those cases, we would have the patient's first last names stored as records in the index table. So when you do make that search query, what the FHIR Engine Library does is to look at the search table, figure out which patients have the names you're searching for, and then you'll go to the resource table via join. You go to the resource table to retrieve the actual JSON documents, which will be returned to the as a result of the query. So that's the purpose of the index tables. And then we have the local change table, which is not in the diagram on the right. But the local change table is essentially a table that keeps all the changes you have made locally, and it is needed because we need to synchronize with a remote server. And when you do upload your data, your patient data that's been collected, etc., the sync API essentially takes the data from the local change table and upload that to the FHIR server. Very quick note, the database we have built is encrypted using SQL Cipher. We have done some integration work using SQL Cipher together with Android key store. So that's obviously to maintain the level of security that's required for implementers. I think I have essentially talked about these different APIs. Just recap here quickly: the data access API, search API, and sync API are the three main APIs. I'm just going to go straight into a bit more code examples for each of them. So the first one, data access API, as I said, it supports the basic data access management use cases. I'm just going to stop here, and then we'll look at an example in our Android FHIR code base, just to show you what actually how you can actually use this set of APIs. So if you have downloaded Android Studio, I recommend that you clone the Android FHIR code base, and you can probably follow along here. The example I want to look at is in the FHIR Engine import test. So this is our robotic tests that test the API essentially, but they also serve as perfect examples to showcase how the APIs actually work. So if you look at this test, let me just zoom in a little bit more actually, make sure people can see this. Please do, because I can't see the chat, when I'm presenting. So if you have questions or if you can't see my screen, please do shout. So yeah, we'll look at this test case. So all it does is save a FHIR patient into the FHIR Engine's database. It's a very simple API, and in the test, obviously we check that it has been done by loading the same patient out of the database and checking that the patient that's been loaded is the same as the one that we saved, right? But just to demonstrate a little bit more, if you do just the things like the autocomplete for the save API, because we use a variable argument, so you can actually either save one patient or you can pass multiple patients to it. There's some flexibility in the API, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to actually compose a list and then pass to it and just keep doing things like this. Obviously, this would be different patients. Yeah, so this is a very quick example of the data access API. Right, I'll carry on. So the search API is actually written as a Kotlin DSL. So DSL is a domain-specific language. It sounds like quite a fancy term, but actually what it is sort of a bunch of APIs we have built so that you can have really simple autocomplete, so that if you are building an application, the developer experience is very smooth. Obviously, it's built for you to search local resources, and there's a little bit of Kotlin code at the bottom, but I think a better way to look at this is actually go to the demo app we have built. So we'll go to the patient. We'll go to the patient list view model file. We'll focus on just one particular section of the code, which we call is a function called the get search results. Essentially, it's a function that returns patients with a name that the user has typed into the screen, right? So here you can see that the FHIR Engine, the search API is actually very simple. You just do FHIR Engine.search, and then in the brackets, you specify your criteria for the search, your requirements for the search. So in this case, we are checking if the query is empty. If it's not, we will use that query to narrow down the patient's name, and then we also narrow down the search to a particular city. In our sort of sample data set, we search for patients in Nairobi, and then we just give a number of a number as a limit of the patients we want to return. So we'll return the first 100 patients from the first patient. Right? Just to showcase sort of the autocomplete, which is kind of the point that this is built in DSL. I want to just type a little bit, start coding a little bit so we can see what's happening here. So if I create a new variable and then I just do FHIR Engine .search, and then I provide the type that I want to search for, then this will just return all patients already. So once it's executed, my patient will be a list of all patients. One thing that's interesting to look at is we are using, because of the way we have written the search API, if you look at the patient class here, because you have provided the search API with a patient type, the compiler is actually able to figure out that the variable the list that's returned from it is actually a list of patients. So if you look at this already, the compiler knows what the list of patients is. This is just one of the examples of the sort of niceness of the DSL that we have created. Obviously, when you start typing things like filter, you can see that there's already a lot of autocomplete options. You can filter things by patient's, for example, family name, and you can specify the values to it. It's all done by calling DSL and providing you with the autocomplete options. Okay, so the sync API, which is still being sort of changed a little bit, so it is subject to a bit more change, I think, at the moment. But the general API itself functions very well, and what it does is basically allows you to upload and download data from and to a FHIR server. So because we use Work Manager, the way to implement the sync API, to use the sync API, is actually to implement the sync worker. And the sync worker, all it does is you need to provide a few parameters for it to start working with the FHIR server. So in this case, in the example you can see here, again, you just say, I'm interested in patients from this city, and the sync API will construct the search request to the FHIR server, and then store the responses from the FHIR server. It also does require you to implement a data source. So this is a set of interface that abstracts away the FHIR server. It is something that the client has to do, but in most cases, it's probably a very box standard set of operations. So you could even just copy that from the demo application we have. And obviously, if you look at the last function in the sync APIs, in the sync worker you have to implement, it does require FHIR Engine because that's the underlying data storage. And then when you want to kick off a sync, you just do sync.one-time sync using your sync worker, and that will start syncing the data with the server. So that's the sort of set of APIs in FHIR Engine. We do have a demo app. You can, if you have cloned the repository, you can just build in Android Studio the demo module name, and then that will just create this app. So for now, I just want to do a very quick live demo to show you what this demo app looks like. I'm just going to switch to my Android testing device here. I hope you can still see my screen. So this is my mirrored screen from my Android test device.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I've just opened this demo app here. It's essentially, so the demo app itself is at the moment connected with a test FHIR server. So that's a FHIR test server. So the stability is not guaranteed to be super stable. So I'm hoping this demo will work. So at the moment, you can see that there's a bunch of patients who have synced that according to the criteria we have specified. And then you can look at these patients. If you click into one of them, there's a bit more information about it, about the patient. I'm not going to go to sort of the survey flow, which we also have built. But the general idea is that you have a patient list, and then you have you can look at the patients. So let me just bring in this screen. So this is the test FHIR server that our demo app is connected with. And you can, there's a web interface. If you're interested, please go and have a look. It's an amazing set of tools here. But what I want to demonstrate is the upload functionality. So I have this tab open to a specific patient. This patient is, I think, Anami Cedric. I think it is in my list, right? So if I just quickly refresh this patient, you can see that there is a phone number. I just want to show that on my Android screen. So this number should be the same as the one from the server. But if I make a modification in the edit patient, so this is where, I don't know why it's not showing on the screen. Oh, it's showing, there's a delay to mirror the screen actually. If I modify the value here, say let's change the final 2 digits from A9 to A8, and then submit. So it's changed locally. You can see patient has been updated. And then if I go and force a sync, let's see if it works. Okay. Because I haven't been syncing for a while, I think maybe it had to warm up the connection. There was a bit of a delay. But hopefully, if I refresh this page, I will be able to see that this digit here has changed from A9 to A8. So that's a kind of a Lime demo. I'm glad you worked of how the sync API works with the our test server. Cool. So I think this is everything I want to talk about in terms of the FHIR Engine Library. I'm just quickly. Okay. I think we're doing okay with time, so I'm just going to carry on with the structured data capture library very quickly before we jump into the more interactive session where we will be building an Android app. I'll present this again. So the structured data capture library is the second library in the Android FHIR SDK. So the purpose of it is really to take away the pain of building Android UI and utilize the FHIR questionnaires to make the development of applications a lot faster, a lot easier. So here is a sort of two diagrams to compare what the development workflow is like before, without, and with the structured data capture library. So if you're not using anything like the structured data capture library, when you build Android UI, if you know a bit about the Android UI, you have to create the UI itself. So that would normally be the activity or fragment, and then you would, if you use the MVVM app architecture, you'd have to create a view model, which is the behavior of the UI, and then you'd have the data that's backing the actual UI. So in this case, it would be something like a questionnaire, right? Or the questionnaire response. So that's how you essentially develop a questionnaire screen. And when you have multiple questionnaire screens, when you have an app with loads of different screens and flows, you end up in a situation where you have to repeat that process quite a bit. And obviously that's not ideal. We don't want developers to spend a lot of time fixing UI bugs. So the idea of the structured data capture library comes about to simplify this flow. On the diagram, in the diagram on the right, you can see that the structured data capture library itself is essentially using a bunch of different FHIR questionnaires. So this is the key here, because there is an existing standard. We really want to use that to simplify the development of the application. So the library will take the questionnaires and then at runtime dynamically generate the UI itself, the behavior, the classes, and then also the data model that's backing the questionnaire screens. So with this flow, you really don't have to repeat all the UI work that you normally have to do with different screens. So a bit more detail on the actual APIs we have provided in the SDC library. The very, very key core part of the library is the questionnaire fragment itself. So this is, if you know anything about Android development, is like most of the things are sort of either in activities or fragments in the front end. So so the fragment is a reusable part of the UI. You can drop into different bits of your screen essentially. So the questionnaire fragment is the fragment class that we have designed to display a questionnaire essentially. And then we have the resource mapper class. So in the SDC specification, there's these two operations called the data extraction and questionnaire population, which are very, very important if you want to integrate your questionnaire into your overall workflow, right? Because after the data has been collected, you do need to translate the answers to the questionnaire into meaningful resources, right? When you register a patient using the Android device, you can't just get a list of strings that you have collected. You have to convert that into the actual patient resource for it to be useful. So that's the data extraction part of it, and the reverse flow of that is the questionnaire population flow. So the resource mapper class is the API that in our code base that allows these two operations to be carried out in the Android application. So we at the moment support definition-based extraction. We have worked on, there is some support for structure map-based extraction as well. And then in terms of questionnaire population, we support the, I think it's called expression-based population, which is the reverse flow of the definition-based extraction. So yeah, so there are different ways of extracting and populating data, and at the moment we don't support all of them. And then finally, the questionnaire response validator is this class that you can use to check the response against your questionnaire to see if everything is answered as required, right? But the questionnaire fragment itself also automatically does validation, so that if you input data that is not according to what the questionnaire wants, there will be error messages shown in the UI. Here is a very quick screenshot of the catalog app we have built. We are still building, actually. So this app lives in the catalog module in the code base. You know, there's a few different screens of the app, right? So the screen that I'm showing here is actually the list of components, we're showcasing the different widgets we have built that you can use in the questionnaire. So these ones will be automatically selected and used for different types of questions. If you have a single choice question, you know, you'll be a radio button group. If you have a text field, like patient name, for example, you would just be a text box. And then there's also item controls in the FHIR specification, in the SDC implementation guide that you can use. So sort of to use the extensions to specify in more detail what exact controls you want, if that is what you need. But the purpose of this app is really, the catalog app itself is just to show what is possible with SDC library. It's not meant to provide actual questionnaires for you to submit and to use in production. So we'll come back to the SDC library in the next part because we'll go through the actual building of an app. But just very quickly, I want to just say a few words about the workflow library, which is the third library in the SDK. It is in very early days, working in progress. It does use the CQL evaluator project. So that's the that's a project that depends on the CQL engine that does reasoning and provides a bunch of APIs for FHIR operations. And then finally, just a bit more detail on the actual APIs. As I said, the two main operations we're looking at to support now is the $apply, which is essentially the generation of care plan, and the $evaluate measure. So that is when you have a measure resource, you're trying to create either individual or population measure report in your workflow. Okay, so I think that's almost the end of this section, but as I promised, very quickly, just want to go through some resources that's available to you if you want to either use the SDK or contribute to the SDK. So first of all, the GitHub repo, the link is here. Please feel free to go and have a look around. If you have any issues, create the issues, create some issues, and subscribe to the issues, start repo, whatever you want to do. And there's also a set of wiki pages in the GitHub repository. Some of them is in quite a lot of detail to walk you through how to use the SDK. So please go and have a look. And the Zulip chat for FHIR, on the chat, there is actually an Android stream. It wasn't created by us, but we obviously encourage anybody who's doing Android development using FHIR to go there, because that's something that we try to monitor we try to answer questions and see what people are talking about on Android stream there as well. So please do feel free to go to ask questions or have a discussion about Android development or about the SDK on that stream. But just to say that stream is a general Android stream, is not exclusively about the SDK. Next, we have a mailing list, Android FHIR SDK feedback@google.com. If you have questions, feedback, please do feel free to mail that, to send an email to that address. And I think that's the end of the part 2. That's the Android FHIR SDK part. Do we take some questions here, or should we go straight into the walkthrough of the building the app?
I say we stop for questions if folks have any.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to come off of mute or raise your hand or type them in the Google Doc or the chat. We are happy to read them. Any questions? All right. We'll give it one more minute. All right. Dad will just go on.
Great. I'm going to start present again. Cool. So now, after the very long intro to the Android FHIR SDK, we'll actually walk through how to build an actual application using the SDK in this part. I think these are some of the links that have been shared earlier on. So if you haven't, I hope you have. If you haven't, please do go to the OpenHIE's food allergy webinar repository and clone the repository. And if you haven't, please download Android Studio. The latest version is okay. And from here, I think we'll jump back to the, oh, actually, before we do that, there's some resources on Android development on this slide. If you are new to Android development, there's actually tons and tons of materials online. These are some of the official sort of materials and pages that's been developed by the Android team. So there's a very good tutorial to walk you through how to build a first application, and then how to run your app on either the emulator or an actual device is also very important, because we'll be doing that later on today. Those are the guides, the links in this slide. And I think with that, we will go to my Android Studio screen. Okay, so I have downloaded, I have cloned the repository. So if you open Android Studio, it probably ask you to open a project, but just to show you what's happening here. So if you do open open a new project, I would recommend that, you know, this is the, excuse me, the food allergy webinar repository, but please do go to the Android folder underneath that repository and then open the Android folder as a project. So in my case, because it's already opened, it doesn't do anything. It's just here. But let me just walk through really quickly what's in this Android folder of the repo. There is a bunch of files that's been created essentially by Android Studio. That's the sort of initial setup for Gradle build scripts and configurations. But the really interesting part of this repository is actually the app folder. So that's where the app actually lives. So what I've checked in, what I've merged into the food allergy webinar repository is essentially a skeleton Android app. So I haven't changed very much. But what I have added is that there is a README file. And in the README file, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more. In the README file, I have created a few steps for you to modify this existing kind of skeleton app into a Android app that shows a questionnaire. So we're going to start. We're going to start going through the steps now. But before we do, I actually just want to quickly build this app and show that this is actually a skeleton app. So I've just clicked the rebuild button. Okay, let's terminate the existing app. If we come back to the screen here, you can see. Sorry, ignore the toast. Sorry, the toast. It's actually from the previous app. Well, I'm still thinking, but the food allergy app that's showing on the screen is, you know, essentially empty Android app, right? All it has is a text label that says "Hello World." So we're going to modify this and change this into a questionnaire. Okay, so let's follow the steps here. The first step is go to the build.gradle file and then add the dependencies to the SDC library as well as the Android FHIR fragment library. So let's have a look. Right, so this is some comments I've already added to the skeleton app. There's essentially two things you have to do. Just uncomment this line. If anything, if you have already got an Android app, you probably already depend on this library, so there's nothing special here. The SDC library is, as I said, is Android FHIR SDK second library, and the current latest version is beta 02. So yeah, so that's how you depend on it. So now that I've added these two, I'm just going to quickly try to sync the project in the background, because Android Studio does need to download the dependencies in the background. Okay, so while the project is syncing, the second step is to essentially take a look at the questionnaire that has been added to this repository. So this is another thing that I did change on top of the skeleton Android app, which is the questionnaire that we have just seen, actually the food allergy questionnaire. I've added to the SS folder. So let's go and have a look at it. It's in the app folder. If you go to app source main assets, you see that this is the JSON file that I've created. I think it may not include, or actually does, it actually includes all the HTML stuff as well. But the main part, as Jose was talking about, the contained value sets, and then the most importantly, the set of items, which are the questions. Right? So obviously, in reality, when you're building your own app, you may have a questionnaire that's a JSON file like this, or you may download the questionnaire from some URL. You could even, if you really wanted to, you could even just create the questionnaire on the fly, right? By either composing JSON or using the FHIR's structured library to create a questionnaire. But either way, this is the questionnaire here. And then, so now we have the dependencies and we have the questionnaire ready. We need to make some actual modifications to the skeleton application. So step 3, modify the layout file. So this is where the definition of the main screen, the initial screen is. And we need to add a fragment container view to host the questionnaire. So let's go to the main activity file. So it lives in the layout folder of the res folder. Okay, so again, effectively the content here has not been changed. What I did was I added some comments here. So if you create a new Android app, this is what it would look like, except for the comments I've added. So the thing we need to add, step 3.1, is to add the fragment to host the questionnaire, which we'll add to the screen. So I'm just going to remove the comment annotation, and then I'm going to just get rid of this hello world label because I don't want it to be on top of the questionnaire to interfere with the questionnaires display. Okay, so that's done. This is where we'll be hosting the questionnaire. And then going back, there's a few more things to do in the main activity file. Basically, let's just go directly into it. So first of all, we need to create the actual fragment itself. You see that there was a dependency issue, but I just need to import the actual reference to the questionnaire fragment class, which is a class that we have, as I said, one of the APIs in the SDC library. So you have to create the fragment itself. So this is the actual where the questionnaire will actually be populated, right? And then the next step is to load the questionnaire JSON file. So this is the JSON file name, and with this sort of a few lines of code does is essentially open the JSON file, raise the content into a JSON string. So that's the string here, which is a variable. Okay, so we've got the questionnaire fragment ready. We've got the JSON string loaded. And the next thing is we're going to tell the questionnaire fragment this JSON string represents the questionnaire we want to display in the questionnaire fragment. Again, let me just resolve the dependency import issue here, quickly add a bundle off. The way to do that is basically pass the questionnaire JSON string as an argument to the fragment. Again, if you're familiar with Android development, this is all very, very box standard. And then finally, using the support fragment manager, which is what you would use in Android to add fragments to activities, to finally add the fragment you have just created to the fragment container view. If I click through, you see that this is actually the the view that we just created in a previous step in the Android layout file. Okay, so let me just resolve the last couple of imports. This is looking good to me. And then if I rerun this application, hopefully we will see to build, but what we actually will see is the replaced with the food allergy questionnaire, and then you won't see the hello world label anymore. So it's asking me to kill the current app and then relaunch the app, which I'll do. Okay, it's been launched. Okay, there's a bit of a lag to mirror the screen. Okay, cool. So now you see that the questionnaire is being generated onto the screen. So all these questions are to the specifications of the JSON file. There's text boxes, sort of drop down, let's cancel that, radio buttons, and then things like the this date input, which is part of the material design spec, and then there's more text inputs you can use. So yeah, so this is essentially the questionnaire questionnaire app. So as you see, we have been through only a few steps in the README file. And go back to the README file. Yeah, so a few steps. Use the existing questionnaire artifact. We're able to modify an empty Android application really quickly and create a screen with questionnaire. And then this is what you can use to collect data to be plugged into your clinical workflow in your Android application. I think that's most of it. I do have another step which I do want to show very quickly before we finish this section and hand over to the questions. I think the one sort of natural thing to do after displaying the questionnaire would be to actually collect the questionnaire response, which I have not added in the 5 steps. But please do feel free to go to the wiki page for the Android FHIR SDK for the SDC library. There's very detailed instructions there. But what I'm going to do here is just actually quickly make a few modifications to the main activity file. And I'm going to rerun this app. Hopefully, I will be able to show you how I can collect the response after the questionnaire has been filled out. So the only thing that I really had to do in what I changed in the file I just copied and pasted is actually adding this submit button here. So what I'm going to do is I'll just sort of fill out a few things. And then I'm going to click this dummy submit button. But before I do that, okay, I'll make sure the logcat window is open and running. So if I do click submit, all I'm doing is, if you can see this, all I'm doing is I'm essentially printing out the questionnaire response to my logcat. Where is it? Yeah, it's basically this line you can see. So what I'm highlighting this in the window below is that you can see this JSON object, which is the questionnaire response, includes the items and also the answers I've given. For example, the random patient ID I've typed, it's being print it out in the console. Obviously, in your application, you may want to save that in your local storage, or even using the FHIR Engine Library's local storage, local database, or you may just store that in some other format, or store it in other places, and that's entirely up to the application. But in order to collect the questionnaire response, really all you have to do is here, as shown here, you just have to call the get questionnaire response API. More details on the wiki page on the GitHub repository. Okay, I think now we have finished this application. Hopefully we have demonstrated to you how easy it can be with Android FHIR SDK. And I think we'll now go to questions and comments. We'll open the floor to everyone. I'll stop presenting as well.
Thank you, Jing. This has been really, really interesting. There's already one question in the chat. So Jean, you say, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. Jean, you have we want to use this with IMCI and CCM, but I have no idea what IMCI and CCM is. Can you please explain?
Hi, sure. It's Jean, kind of like your name. IMCI is Integrated Management of Childhood Illnesses, and CCM is Community Case Management, also of childhood illnesses, things that are used in the communities. And I got the impression that this was going to be used for those as well, but I could be wrong. And I'm wondering if something has already been developed, or if you're planning on developing the diagnostic tools, not reporting, but diagnostic.
I think I can take this because it's not about the tool; it's about the way to get those specifications into the tool. So what we've seen today is, from the moment that we have the specification in terms of what is the data structure that we want to capture, like we want to capture the patient, and within the patient ID and the date of birth, and we want to capture in this. So in this case, just the patient ID and the allergy type, etc. So once we have that, then we have an application. So I do not know if IMCI and CCM already have been the subject of such a specification in the FHIR sense of, let's produce the questionnaire, the form that would capture the data that we want. That's one thing. If so, what we have shown today is that once you have that, you just get the application very easily built. The other thing is about the diagnostics. What kind of diagnostics tools do you mean with that?
Well, for example, you would run through a series of questions. Do you have a fever? Do you have a cough? And then if you have these things, this is what you are diagnosed as, and this is the medicine that you would get.
Right. So this is exactly one of the points that Jing was mentioning before, which is we have the plan definitions and the care plan. So if we have if we have a situation from which we ask questions, and out of these questions we come up with some numbers, some figures, or some values, and there is a system behind it that says, in this case, you collect the temperature, or you collect the number of times that the person had fever in the last week, or something like this. And depending on that data, we can have a thing called plan definitions, like our protocol, that defines what care plan should be instantiated for this patient in these conditions. So the technologies to do that are being developed as we speak. I do not know what's the current progress of IMCI and CCM in transporting into FHIR, but once they are on FHIR, meaning the questions that you ask, then from today we know what to do with them. We put them in a form. The protocol and the workflow definition, so the sequence of steps and the guidelines, those are another part of FHIR that we can actually address also soon, and will be supported by the same tool set. But once those are on FHIR specifications, then we can do the same thing with them. So out of your question, I can say in short, We are building the foundation for those. The form, like the questions part is what you see today. The planning and diagnostic diagnostic management, diagnostic and therapy management, those could be an interesting topic for a future webinar. And at some point, it will really depend on whether those specifications have been ported to FHIR or not. I hope that helps. And now, Jose Garcia and Jing, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I just want to quickly jump in. Can I just present my screen again, really quickly? I want to go back to the reference application we have I've shown earlier on. So this is the FHIR Engine demo app, right? So what I actually did here was I went into a particular patient. I just did like a quick survey. So this is a little bit of sort of application logic we have built in. Essentially, these surveys are supported.
It's for COVID, okay.
Yeah. So these are supported by the questionnaire library that I talked about actually. But then in this case, you know, just as an example, we actually have like a color-coded sort of like, you know, like we're saying you have a moderate likelihood for whatever the questionnaire is about, right? And then there is like a little bit of more information you can see at the bottom to show the conditions you have self-reported and the observations that may have been self-reported or reported by the, you know, the health worker. So I think this is kind of similar to
that would do it, yeah.
Right, but I just want to say like a lot of this is, you know, what we have built into the demo app is just a demo. So there's a lot of moving parts, as Jose said. There's a lot of foundational work being done. So I don't think I can give you a simple answer just to say that yes, you can do that or you can't do that. I think the process is actually gonna it's got to be like going through a bit of development and then figuring out what logic you need and what different maybe logic engine you'll need. Either that is sort of using CQL, you're using smart guidelines or something, and whether sort of how to put that together into the application. But or it could be like a very simple application where you don't look at reusing a lot of that and just have built-in logic in the app. So either way, I hope that helps. I'm going to stop presenting.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Jean, just to make clear, and sorry, Jose, just 10 more seconds. The way that we are doing this is to provide that foundational tool so that for two reasons, as we mentioned in the previous webinar, if we do something that works for COVID or for HIV or for something, it should be very easy for you to say, I want to use the same platform, the same things, but I don't want COVID. I want perinatal care, or I want malaria follow-up or whatever. Then you should just build all of those layers and do this with the consequential impact of this, which is if you just want to change one field and one definition or one value range, you should not go through a whole lot of development process. It becomes pretty much about if you can change your FHIR specifications, the rest of the tool follows through. So you have a much faster iteration cycle, and you can show it to your stakeholders. Is this what you want? And they say, no, yeah, I missed one field. Good, give me 5 minutes, and you'll see the application showing the new thing in 5 minutes. And this is pretty much what we're aiming for. So you can put your layer on top of the tools, whatever those purposes are. The only requirement is express it in a FHIR language.
Great, thank you.
Jose Garcia.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, thank you very much for this. It has been really impressed, the presentation. So thanks a lot. So my question, well, I am not a FHIR expert, and so sorry if my question doesn't make much sense. But once that you have the specification of a patient or something like that, can you, or are you going to be able in the future also to define kind of a logic on that? For instance, like I am collecting that the patient is the gender, that is a woman, and then depending of the gender, so next question can be pregnancy status or, you know, this kind of logic. Are you planning or to include that, or is already there, or?
It's already there in two ways. Today we have presented the questionnaire. So questionnaire is one way of entering FHIR data without being all those 100 and something FHIR resources. So there's a FHIR resource for patient, and there's a FHIR resource for observation, and there's a FHIR resource for allergy. But if you want to capture just all of that, just the key things about analogy reporting in one thing, you don't have to put the patient resource and the allergy resource and separately. You just put them together in a questionnaire, and you just ask the questions that you really want to ask, and then let this be mapped to FHIR resources. So that's the purpose of questionnaire. But on the questionnaire, in these libraries that we have, there is one built-in possibility, that is, if this question has this value or has this value range, then enable the other question, or this question is only enabled if that other question has a value of X. So that is already there. And that's on the questionnaire side, on the data capture side. On the server side, on the FHIR resource side, there's also one thing that we call invariance or constraints, which we can say this resource is only valid if this value is like this and this value is not like that. So we can do that. But for the case of, for example, for pregnancy status, this would be very common in a questionnaire, that you ask a lot of questions and you say, please state your gender. And if the gender is male, then you don't bother asking about pregnancy questions, because that would not apply. So that, if that is more on the data capture and not on the backend, then the FHIR library does support that already out of the box.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'll put a link on the chat for something that, for those of you who might want to explore a bit the questionnaires without going too much into the language issues of this, I just posted a link there. It's the form builder from the National Library of Medicine, and there you can define the attributes for the form. Maybe I can very quickly share my screen. And it's like what I did in code before. This is a user-friendly way of entering this. So you have the form attributes, which is the URL, the publisher, etc., all those values that you might have. And then you have the items, which are the questions. So the item is in this case, let me start with a panel, and it's a new item. I'm going to add something, and this is a panel. So these are the properties of this. And there are some basic attributes, like what's the type? Is it a question? Is it a display? Is it a group? What's the name, etc. So we are building the FHIR questionnaire resource with this, and then we can have attribute things, for example, add conditional show logic, which is yes, and then if the condition is true, and then I think you have to be able to have, yeah, so let's say if this is item name, also if the item ID is gender, then you could add another item, and then this other item is a question as well. I'm not doing this with the right syntax, so there's a couple of iterations that we could do, and you can always go back to us on chat.phir.org or read through the examples. But if I have the question to this first one is gender, so I can go here and say conditional show logic, yes, if gender is, you can do this. Again, I'm not sure if with the quotes and double quotes, etc., or if the equals or double equal. I don't know if this is the right syntax, the perfect syntax for this, but it will be revealed very quickly, because once we build the implementation guide, it will tell us if there's any error. But yeah, so this is just, I just wanted to take the opportunity to show another way of building those questionnaires. And once you do this, then you have those conditions there. So obviously it's complaining. I don't know.
Yeah, but I get it. It's really good.
And you see, you have this questionnaire, which is actually the one that you can just put direct if you don't want to bother through the FHIR implementation guide, which I really advise you to always do if it's a project, a proper project. But if it's just a tryout, you can just come here. Oh, here's a nice way to make a questionnaire. I can put my questionnaire in the Android library, and I have my application. Now you can see it here, or you can put it in the Android application.
Okay. Thank you.
There was another question. I think, Jing, you already answered that question, GCP. I don't know what GCP is, so I'm
yeah, it's Google Cloud. So yeah, I will answer that just for other people's benefit as well. So the question is there any guide on how to connect Android FHIR SDK with GCP? There isn't at the moment. So first of all, I want to say that the SDK is designed to work with any server that sort of is a that qualifies as a FHIR server, right? So as long as you have the capabilities of serving serving requests according to the FHIR standards, Android FHIR SDK, in theory, is able to connect with it. In reality, what we have done a lot of testing with is Happy, the open source Happy FHIR server, which I'm sure some of you would be very familiar with, and GCP. So these are the two things that we have tested quite a lot in our sort of development. So there isn't a wiki guide at the moment on the repository, but we really do want to get something up there fairly soon. So if that's something that is really important to you, please do let us know. Well, obviously it is because you asked the question, but you can provide us with some more details on, your priority and sort of your use cases, so we can have a look at that and see if we will be able to support everything. So, and also, as I said, the code base takes contributions, and that includes not just code, even wiki. If people would like to author or contribute to the content and documentation of the code, we're very happy to look at that. So please do reach out to us and we can collaborate on that if there's a need. But in any case, we do want to get a wiki up there very quickly about sort of connecting with GCP. So stay tuned.
Any other questions? Any other thoughts that people may have been triggered with this discussion? Anyone would want to share their projects or what they think this could be useful, or whether this is useful for their planned projects? I think the silence then means that people are ready to be done with this topic.
I have one more question, if I can. Yeah, sorry, Jose. Also, is it possible, like very basic calculations? You have like you're collecting some data, and then you would like to multiply a value and another value, and it's possible also to define that, or is okay?
There in the last session we had, so I would invite you to look at the previous webinar on case reporting. I think throughout that I was showing something that was not for case reporting, but just as a demonstration of the FHIR SDC library or FDC features, and one of them was actually calculating a score. So if you give this answer and this answer and that answer and that answer, then your total score is 1. And if you change this, then the other one is you have a different score. And depending on your score, then some different questions appear. So that there's a demo out there of those features. I will put the link of the SDC here. I think it's an interesting specification to go through, and there will be lots of information about this out there in the web. So the SDC is basically the specification that we're using. It has all sorts of things like automatically populating a form, creating different paging views for the form, pre-filling, filling questions based on other answers that were there. So there's several, or showing things in red. There's several examples of how to best use the FHIR standard in those standard features. I would invite you to read through that and use those features in your own questionnaires.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly add from the Android FHIR SDK's perspective in our SDC library, the expressions that I think is what we've been talking about. So the expressions is something we are still developing. We have been sort of in the past focusing on building the actual widgets and UI development, and now we're looking at probably a bit more logic sort of support, including expressions, including sort of library support for CQL. But yeah, those are the things that will be coming in the future versions. But again, if people are trying the library and then is blocked by some of the features that we're developing, please do reach out and leave a comment on the issue, create a discussion thread on the repository, because those are the signals we'll be able to take to readjust our prioritization. Thank you.
If there is any more questions, we would welcome them. If those questions come later, you can always reach, and please always reach out on chat.fhir.org. As usual, the usual recommendation, if you don't have an account on chat.fhir.org, go and create one. It's a wonderful community that is really devoted to helping experts, intermediate people, or just beginners on FHIR. It really is a good, well-motivated community. So please just join the community and don't feel afraid to say, I have no idea where to start, or I have a tool and it doesn't work. Can someone please help me or provide me some information? Lots of knowledge in there that you would benefit from if you, in whatever stage there. I use it daily, so and it's really useful. I learn a lot, and I see who I can help or who can help me. It's really something that you should consider always reaching out as one channel to use. So add it to your bookmarks. Add an account and add it to your bookmarks. Okay. Is there any other topics, any questions that someone would want to bring? Any ideas for future discussions? Any things that we feel were not sufficiently covered in this session? If you think of something, just reach out, and if not, then I think we can close this session for today. Thanking you for your presence and thanking Jin for the awesome demonstration and the preparation work. So we try to make the preparation as good as possible, so that we would just have to show how easy it is to do it out of the box. I think that was a good thing that we had today. Thank you, Jing, for just showing us in 5 steps how to set up an Android application once you have the questionnaire. And thank you all for attending, and I see you all around in chat.fhir.org or somewhere.